Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Family Law Show. I'm your host, Enrique Figueroa, and today on the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Katelynn Mitchell, the founder and owner of K. Mitchell Law, PLLC in Boise, Idaho. Katelynn hails from Kailua Kona, Hawaii, and is licensed to practice law in the state of Idaho and Hawaii. She is also a founding member of the Meridian Law Group, which offers a variety of legal services to the greater Treasure Valley area in Idaho. She is a protagonist in the Idaho Trial Lawyers Association, the Young Lawyers section of Idaho State Bar, the Concordia Alumni Association, and the Boise Young Professionals. Katelynn, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
So, where do we start off here? How did the journey begin? How did you find yourself or find your way into the practice of law?
Well, kind of interesting backstory. I never really intended to become a lawyer. Don't come from a family of lawyers or anything like that. Actually have no lawyers in my family, but a lot of educators and, teachers, principals, social workers, that kind of stuff, just focusing in on human services. So when I went to college, I left Hawaii to go to college in Arizona and studied education, had every intention of becoming a elementary education teacher. And when I did that, I did some student teaching in my last year in a juvenile detention facility. That was to help get some special education hours under my belt. And with that, I started to see a glimpse of the courtroom, a glimpse of how to help these kids, and what's going to make the most difference to them. And I saw it being more in the courtroom than in the classroom. And maybe that was the specific place I was in and the kids that I was around, but kind of opened my eyes to like juvenile law and all those kind of areas. So I thought more about it, decided to apply for law school, changed my mind a few different times in law school, as I think most people do, and then decided I want to become a public defender, want to work with kids more. Realized while in law school that there aren't that many legal jobs that allow you to work with kids. You can be a public defender, you can be a prosecutor in the juvenile system, or you can, work with child protection agencies and that kind of stuff. But eventually I just kind of landed in family law. I don't work a lot directly with kids, but, you have a way to touch the kids, help the kids when you can. So definitely has progressed and changed over the years. Didn't ever see myself doing divorces in family law, but here I am and I don't hate it. So
how many years in now are you in your law practice?
So about 2.5. Right out of law school, I was pretty tired from after taking the bar and everything. And I just kind of sat around for a little while, applied for jobs, couldn't really find a job, had a hard time. And I eventually took a pro bono family law case that I focused on pretty much full time for a few months and just learning the intricacies of family law, learning how to do it on my own. And from there, it just kind of progressed. I moved into an office and then I started the PLLC. And then it's been 2.5 years now that I've been in my office practicing family law.
Now, when you're starting out brand new, kind of, you hit the ground running and then you kind of got to dip your feet in and figure it out. But building that client book from the early days, is that, forming relationships with other attorneys? Does that involve, kind of grassroots advertising? How did you really get started with your client book when you were a brand new attorney?
I would say a lot of it is luck. I was just circumstances. I moved into an office that is a larger family law criminal defense firm with 6 attorneys, and 2 other attorneys here are also sole practitioners. So I just, from the get-go, I was able to assist them on some of their cases, and cases that they didn't want to take, whether it be a lower paying client or a subject matter they just didn't want to deal with, they would send to me. So just as many associates do, I definitely got the uglier cases or the non-paying clients up front. But over time, you just kind of start to build that reputation. And, being involved in so many organizations helped me get, referral sources and all that kind of stuff. And for a while, I was definitely chosen, I think, because I was a lower price point for many people. And being out of law school, I wasn't ashamed of that. I was, brand new. I was struggling my way through it. And some people that's fine with, when they're not met with an insanely high bill. But over time, I've definitely progressed to, building that reputation. A lot of my clients come from word of mouth. I was told very, very early on in my career by the partners here that, most of your cases will come from referrals. And that's something I've really stood by. And I think that's changing now. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be true for my career as we get more into the online world of marketing and everything. But I've valued that advice. And I've tried really hard to build a good referral base, clients that work together start to tell all their friends who need divorces. And I have multiple clients from multiple agencies that come my way because they heard from a coworker. So it's different things. And now I'm lucky enough to have more of an online base where people do just call me because they found me online. But I think maintaining the fact that there are the referrals are important is a good thing.
Now, I want to go back a little bit where you said when you first got your start, some of the attorneys you were working with, they were passing off some of the more difficult cases to you. Do you feel that that's kind of given you an advantage as you progress in your career, that you kind of, I guess if you want to use like a skiing analogy or something like that, you pretty much started on like the black diamond slopes. Do you think that helps out a bit?
I'd say so. Whether it be a difficult client that they just didn't want to deal with, which was usually the case, you learn patience, you learn how to handle people that are difficult to deal with. And it's not always easy. You get to a point where you're sometimes thrust into the role of a counselor or of a babysitter. And a lot of people say that, family law is just glorified babysitting. And I don't always find that. But in those difficult cases where you have people that need someone to talk to every single day or want to treat you as a counselor. You have to learn how to not only convince them that that's not your role, but learn how to have those skills moving forward to prove to other people that that's not your role.
Now, do you think kind of your background, you said you wanted to start off kind of in education, which I would assume that makes you pretty compassionate by nature. Do you think that compassionate disposition about yourself does help you in the realm of family law?
I think so. I've found recently that a lot of people appreciate that I will just listen to them. Some people have had experiences with attorneys that just shut them down pretty quickly, don't want to hear a lot of the stuff they have to say. And I take the time to listen. And I do think that sets me apart, which I find somewhat surprising, as you like to think that other attorneys out there are just shutting people down, only getting the information they want. But I think it's also a fine line because I also don't want to establish a relationship with people that they can talk to me about all their problems at all times. And, they talk to me about the emotional components of it, because at the end of the day, I don't want to bill them for 2 hours worth of time when they're crying to me about how sad they are. It's not really fair, and it's not my position. So I think it's kind of a balancing act there. How do I make these people feel heard? Let them know that I'm thinking of what they care about, but also, tell them that, this comes down to what the law is and not what you believe is fair or what you think should happen. So it's something I'm still working on every day. I've had in the last week, clients come in that really just wanted to talk about the emotional side of it. And I've done better now at making it clear up front that, I'm welcome. Like, I welcome those conversations, but it's not what I'm here for. And sometimes I even have to advise them to find a counselor. So that can be a hard conversation.
Now, some of the roadblocks you run into, I'm curious about that point where you often get on the phone with clients who maybe have been through another attorney or someone else who didn't really kind of gel with them or hear them out. Do you feel that roadblock usually pertains to like a personality type, or is it something different where another attorney might pass on a client that you see good in that you could help?
I think both. I've found recently that some clients who come to me, after either leaving their old attorney or not wanting to go back to their old attorney after they need to come back to court after a few years, as commonly happens with custody modifications. These people who they break up and they're trying to co-parent with an ex, they come back multiple times over the years, and unfortunately, it's just the way it works sometimes. But anyway, those people, it seems like sometimes it is just personality. You know, some attorneys don't want to hear the emotional side of it at all. And in some ways I admire that. I mean, it's not in our job description, but at the same time, to make these people feel heard and so that they understand what you're doing, why you're recommending what you're recommending, why you think the judge is going to do what they're going to do. It takes a little bit of a backstory and a little bit of explaining and hearing their emotional concerns so you can best address how they're going to, take in what you have to say.
So you are also licensed in Hawaii. I'm really curious. I mean, it's always interesting to find out how law differs state by state. I feel like Idaho to Hawaii, there's got to be some pretty major differences, or am I wrong in thinking that?
There are. There definitely are. And I'm no expert. I haven't actually practiced in Hawaii yet. It was more so I went to law school, took the bar in Idaho, had a little bit of a, quarter life crisis. Where do I want to live? Where do I want to settle down? And the thought of going back home to Hawaii was an exciting one to me. So I decided might as well take the bar now when everything's somewhat fresh in my mind, as opposed to having to wait and deciding to move in 20 years and having to retake the bar. There's reciprocity that you could probably do eventually, but I was just focused on, if I want to move now or if I want to move however long from now, I'll be able to. So I thought a lot about how to integrate a practice in both places. And right now it's just not very practical just because of travel costs and everything. I'm still kind of working on just learning the intricacies of the Idaho law as it relates to family law matters. But eventually, my ideal situation would be able to practice in both places. I've actually had people come to me in Idaho because I do have those Hawaii connections. There's only been a few. There's not a lot of people who travel back and forth between these two states. But that being said, it's come up more than I thought it would. So to be able to practice in both places, I think would be ideal eventually. And there's a lot of issues that, buying and selling of property in Hawaii, custody disputes that cross state lines that I think would come up. And I mean, better now than ever to do virtual. I mean, all the court is virtual anyway in both places. So maybe I'll be able to make it work.
So, I mean, I have to think that actually being in Idaho right now, there's been a real housing boom over like the last 2.5 years, right? I mean, the population is just growing exponentially.
Absolutely. It's insane here.
So with that, I mean, I feel that, with that going on, the opportunity's got to be growing. There's got to be more cases, more clients. It's almost like you've been in on the ground floor of an area that's just starting to like really begin to blossom.
Definitely. And I haven't actually looked at it that way yet. So I can appreciate that. It's a lot of people are moving here. It's, one of the fastest growing areas in the country. And, I'm not an exception to that. I moved here, 7 years ago, but still I'm a transplant. So I understand that, at the rate people are moving, there's going to be more need for services. And that includes custody disputes, divorces, paternity issues, civil protection orders, all that kind of stuff that comes along with larger populations of people. And I'm happy I graduated when I did. I'm happy I got on, like you said, the ground floor, because as everything is growing and I'm starting to have a bigger online presence and establish that client base, I think there's never, hopefully, going to be like a downturn in work. It's just going to go up. And I consider myself lucky for that.
So with the pandemic and COVID, did you have to make any kind of like big sweeping changes for the firm to kind of adjust to that, or were you already fairly equipped to handle it?
It didn't change much for me. Obviously, the going to court and entering the courtroom and doing all that changed, and that was different. My office is a block and a half from the courthouse. And that's one of the reasons that I am here, is because it was like you could walk to the courthouse in 4 minutes and there wasn't a lot of travel time associated. And, now never entering that building is very interesting. But at the same time, I had already been trying to get away from the paper files, the hard copies of everything. And so I can't say much changed for me. I didn't ever really work from home. We tried it for a week or two here and there, but at the same time, I'm just one of those people that's much more productive at work. And it's more of a mindset thing for me. So, I would come in and just, even when the courts were completely closed and nothing was going on, try and carry on as normal. And frankly, there has been an uptick in our field since the pandemic. It's divorces have gone up, custody battles have gone up, and stuff like that. So while I feel fortunate that, I wasn't one of the people whose job, there was less work available, it's been pretty much a rush since, I would say last April or May.
So was there a bit of a lag before cases started seeing a bit of an uptick due to quarantine, or was it almost like just immediate?
I mean, I would say within the first month, everything was slow, but otherwise it's been pretty much a madhouse since then.
So, Katelynn, when you were first starting out your firm, what were some of the obstacles you had to overcome? I guess that's a broad question, but if you could think of like maybe 3 or 4 things to advise young attorneys coming into the market on, like things they're going to run into to not kind of let it get them down, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. So the one thing I've learned, and I think it's been the hardest, and the one thing that's really been hard was to manage the client expectations. And that's something they don't really talk to you about in law school. There's no really, running your own firm or how to deal with clients. It's all just the basic law. And one thing I really struggled with was doing that, was, having a client walk in the door. They want the sun and the sky and the moon. And I didn't do a good job at saying, that's not very realistic. Or, we can try, but here are your chances. It was more so, yeah, okay, sure. And then suddenly you're 5 months down the road and you're realizing that you're going to disappoint them because what you initially told them is inaccurate. Or not that it's not accurate, but it's just, you didn't do a good job at kind of reining in what they were expecting. So that was definitely a big learning curve for me. And it's something that I've gotten a lot better at as time has gone on. Someone walks in the door, we sit down and I just say, okay, well, this is what the law is. This is what's probably going to happen in your case. We can definitely try to do all these things you want to do, but keep in mind that, your chances of success are this. And, I've only seen in my time of practice this happen once, or I've never seen this happen. We can try, but I just want to know that it probably won't. So I think there's an art there. You also, you need to retain clients. You need to have people hire you. So it's also like you don't want to completely say no. What you're asking for, you're not going to get. There's an art there, and I'm sure every day I can get better at it. But I think that associates and people right out of law school really want to please clients, and they really want those clients to come in the door. So they're not necessarily good at managing those expectations. Another thing that has been difficult is the burnout, just kind of like we were talking about earlier, making sure that you're living a life outside of work, not taking your work home with you every single night, not working all through your weekends, taking those vacations. I think a lot of sole practitioners, unless you're an associate at a big firm or you have a good support staff, there's no such thing as paid time off. You have to work in order to get your money. So, you have to still take those vacations. You still have to take that time off and just plan accordingly on how to make money that month or something like that. That has definitely been a learning curve for me. And a third thing I think is the billing aspects. I mean, doing that all on my own, not having, assistance there has been difficult. It's billing is truly an art as well. I mean, I talk to my friends about this all the time, and the fact that, you might spend 8 hours on something, but what's realistic to bill for it? Or you might spend 20 hours on something, or you might spend 5 minutes on something. It's, there is an art there. And a lot of people don't realize at a law school, what it's going to take to learn about that. And it's been a slow learning process for me, but it's finally getting there, I think.
Now you mentioned a lot about the connections, and when I did your intro, you had a list of accolades and associations you've been involved in. Do you think that a lot of young attorneys coming in kind of think about the networking aspect, or is it something they neglect? Because clearly you didn't neglect it. And I think it's clear that that's helped you out a lot, is forming those solid relationships with other professionals in your area. Now, do you think that's something that is just vitally important?
I do. I do. And I went to a law school that focused a lot on that. So, I do attribute some of my success there to them. I think a lot of people probably in bigger cities, bigger law schools miss that. It's more about getting the best grades, writing the best law review article and all that. But for me here, it was much more about networking. And those institutions and organizations that I was a part of are the only reason that I'm here today. I'll give myself some credit, but for the most part, it's those things. And, I mentioned the pro bono case earlier that got me here, and it was handed to me by a former classmate who then told me her office had an office to rent. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll jump in there. So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that networking. And I probably wouldn't have made it without the help from other attorneys in my office that were giving me work, were allowing me to work on their cases and paying me. And, during the first few months when I had a client or two, though that work was very important. So the networking is everything. And to this day, I still refer people out to the PI firm I used to work at, or other classmates that are now, either associates or running their own practice. And the networking it's everything.
Thank you very much, Katelynn. I think we've got a lot of great information there, and I really think you've given us a really awesome perspective, more so to attorneys, first coming in right now. I think this is all really great stuff that they should really pay attention to, take with them when they're building their law practices. And we wish you continued success. And thank you very much for joining the Family Law Show today. And for those who are listening, maybe for the first time today, please be sure to subscribe. Click on the link at the bottom or visit us at scorpion.co. And we'll see you next time on the Family Law Show. Take care.
Thank you for having me.